Okay, we are now to our final panel of the day, and this is the panel that is going to discuss the newest, the pending, and the hopefully soon to come new ethanol blend, E15. This panel is made up of Ron Lamberty, who is the Senior Vice President of the American Coalition for Ethanol. He did spend his first 20 years of his career in the convenience store and petroleum wholesale distributing business. So he's going to talk about blending your own ethanol and the consumer advantages to the product. So with that.
All right, thank you, and thanks to everybody, you brave, hardy souls who've stayed for this. Hopefully we'll have some information you can use, and I think we'll have some time that you can ask questions. I think the heading of this thing talked about consumers and need to know, what consumers need to know about E15. And I think there's always this question about what they already know. And unfortunately for us, a lot of what they already know is wrong. Thought it was interesting that the slide that you see up here, as we talked about VTEC last year, most of us mentioned the fact that this is a tax credit that goes to the pumps. That's something that gives people a discount on their fuel, and yet, nobody really took that. They figured, it's a subsidy. It's a big check that's written to somebody, and we kind of became the poster child for federal programs. And so now, over the last week or so, we've seen stories like this one trickle out, talking about how gas prices are going up, and that one of the reasons is that this tax credit for ethanol went away. And sort of the way they're worded, and then the way they're reported, was that somehow this is something that ethanol did, when in fact it's the exact thing that we told people would happen. It's a tax credit that went away. We have a lot of information out there about our product that's not well known, and sometimes you wonder how you're going to combat that, or whether you should, whether it should just be something that it's a product that's adds octane, it's cleaner burning, it does a lot of other things, and right now refiners actually see the value of it and put it in their fuel because the octane works for them, they can meet the renewable fuel standard, and so there's plenty of reasons that people use it. Do we need to really battle that? And so we can get tied up sometimes in talking to people about things that, trying to correct misconceptions, and we're all supposed to do that. We did a very informal study just recently about some different efforts that we might want to undertake at the American Coalition for Ethanol, and one of the things that we found out was that about 2/3 of the people that say they don't use ethanol also say that there's probably nothing we can tell them that would make them use ethanol. And ironically, though, on the other side of the spectrum are people who use ethanol right now who use E10, 80% of whom said they'd probably use E15 if it were available. So I think when we do get E15 out to the marketplace, one of the things we're going to have to make sure we tell people is that it's out there and that they can use it. What they need to know about E15, basically, it's the most tested fuel in the history of fuels in the United States. I believe, was it a 180 or 270-day turnaround that was supposed to be on this fuel? We're running up on 3 years here in another couple months, and so all of the tests have been done. It's been tested safe for the vehicles that it's approved for, and it's approved for and not required. There are so many people that we talk to in the BYO program that we do along with the Renewable Fuels Association. So many petroleum marketers we talk to, consumers we talk to, that think that E15 is a mandate. We'd like them to use it. We think most of them will, as we found when we put E10 into markets that never had E10. Once consumers try this kind of fuel, they like it and they continue to use it. But it's not required for anything. It's approved for anything 2001 cars and light trucks. That's what it's approved for. That's what we'd like to see people try it in. No stations have to sell it, and nobody has to buy it. That's an important distinction that I also don't think is out there. Again, when you hear news reports about it, they talk about E15 mandates. There's no such thing. I've read a lot of reports, this next one, a lot of reports about, and a lot of them come in the small engine sphere of different publications you hear. People talking about, we've had people report that they've had trouble with E15 in some sort of equipment. If they tell you that, they're lying. I mean, other than a couple of stations in Iowa that sell it as a flexible fuel, and maybe some more now in some of these other markets where we've put in some blender pumps, E15 isn't available anywhere. I mean, it hasn't been, all of the steps haven't been completed. It's not approved. And so people who talk about things that have happened with E15 are simply taking spook stories that they've heard in the media over the last year and saying that that's what's going to happen. Now, it's something that we expect there will be people who say those things happen once the whole rollout eventually takes place. But right now, that's just not the case. When you can buy it, this is the other thing we want to make sure people know. And when they can buy it, it'll be higher octane in most, we believe it will be. It'll be cleaner burning, and it'll probably cost less. Might not, but we expect that it'll probably have the same economic advantages that ethanol has right now as far as cost advantage. These are the list of things that we know that went away. The volumetric ethanol excise tax credit, the alternative fuels infrastructure credit, the secondary tariff on imported ethanol. Now, the USDA Rural Development announced a notice of funding availability just earlier. Was it earlier this week? It was Monday of this week that they've got some money available, and they will do blender pumps again. Everybody will be doing their parts of these different things, and we will do the same through the BYO program and then through American Coalition for Ethanol. If you contact us, if you're a station owner, we can walk you through that process. And I know IRFA will do the same. They had some folks that applied and that they helped out too. And I have noticed that all of the USDA offices are really eager to go with this program because they had good luck with it last time. The implementation update on E15, the one thing you get asked all the time is, when is it going to happen? I mean, we've got who can use it, and I don't have a better answer than you would have had last week or last month. There's the list of things that still need to be done, and some are done in most cases, but there's a final ruling that will come out at some point, and E15 will be available at some point. I will say this, one of the things that we've been that I will give absolutely applaud Iowa for is that you saw this stuff coming a year and a half ago and took care of all of the different options that are out there, all of the different roadblocks that have been cleared here. And so I was just asked by someone out here in an interview, what do you think will happen in Iowa? And I expect that when E15 is available, Iowa will be one of the first places that it's seen widely available to consumers because of the steps that you took to clear those roadblocks and to make sure that it's a safe fuel, that it's a fuel that all of these different pieces of rules and regulations that might stop people from selling E15, that those have been taken care of. And so I applaud you for that. And I do think once E15 is available, the first place you're going to be able to get it is going to be in Iowa. Common retailer concerns when we go to these trade marketer shows or trade shows and talk to marketers, and we'll hear whether or not this is. We'll see if this is amplified. But what we hear about is, when will they be available? What about the summertime? The 1 pound waiver, that gets to be a pretty significant item. That 1 pound waiver that applies to fuel blends of 9 or 10%, but not 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15. In other words, in April to September of each year, you have to have 9 pound reed vapor pressure gasoline, a low vapor pressure gasoline. If you add 10% ethanol, it can be 10, or it can be 10 pounds. 10%, according to EPA, is 9 or 10. And even though 11 has less reed vapor pressure than 10, and 12 has less than 11, and 13 and 14 and 15 are all less than the ones before them, those aren't legal because it's not written into the legislation that way. So that can be a problem. It right now effectively puts a cap on some markets. ASTM has got some changes in their flex fuel specification that should help marketers who sometimes have to switch pumps and switch blends seasonally, maybe more than they'd like. And then there are bound to be new specs for things like, well, obviously E15 is the first one, but E20, E30, some other things that'll be out there. All of those are necessary so that consumers can know what they're getting, meets the requirements of what they thought they were going to get, and so that a retailer knows that he's selling what he thinks he's supposed to sell. People ask us what blends will be viable after VTEC. We don't know. If prices stay where they are right now, one of the things that I thought I had put on that second slide, one of the things that people don't know is right now ethanol costs less than gasoline. Everybody in this room knows that, but the general public, because they've heard all of these things about ethanol increasing prices, thinks that ethanol costs more. Ethanol costs less. What blends will be viable if the price of ethanol continues to be lower than gasoline? And with the steps that we have to go to get gasoline nowadays, that's likely, I think. If it continues to follow gasoline, then whatever blend your car can use that is highest will probably be the most attractive. Now, will they be viable? I don't know. Some people use them, some people won't, but we do have that opportunity. Certainly, if we're going to be selling a premium product at a discount, we need to promote the fact that it's available and that more people can use it so people will at least know that they have a choice and maybe take that choice a few times to find out how it works. How will customers know what fuel to use? There are no shortage of people that will help you label your pumps. EPA has a required label for E15 that's blaze orange. They have required labels for E85, and so there should be there shouldn't be much trouble with people knowing which blend is there. The general public, most of them can read. Sometimes when they see signs on gas pumps, you don't know for sure whether they can, but in most cases, we tell retailers, make sure they're clearly labeled what those products are, and I can't imagine why marketers or consumers would have much trouble finding whichever fuel it is they want to use. Questions about liability insurance coverage. Again, I go back and applaud IRFA and the Iowa legislature for taking care of that, making sure that consumers have the responsibility to take care of their own vehicles, that if you label these things properly and clearly, that if a consumer uses it knowing what they're using, that they have the responsibility for taking care of their own equipment. Keeping in mind, of course, that the stuff has been tested like crazy and it's not going to cause problems, but at least you've got to be able to make sure that people don't think they're going to have any, or that you put to rest some of those concerns that people have expressed over the years as you attempt to sell more of this fuel. And then available equipment funding. Different states have different programs. Iowa's is one of the best. The states around us, South Dakota, we just went on a tour with the governor's office of economic development there. They have a very attractive blender pump program. And as those things become available, we'll make sure, and as will I'm sure everybody else in the industry, make sure that retailers know about those things, because they're in an incentive business. That's how, when you brand a station, there are programs that help you pay for the branding. When you put certain merchandise in your store, if it needs to be displayed a certain way, there's people that help you do that. And we're in that business. We need to be able to help retailers display and sell our product. This is just some of the stuff we do through the BYO campaign. Others have different labels. I don't think there's a single petroleum marketer out there who is sitting on the fence saying, boy, I'd like to do it, but what I really need is stickers. I don't think that's what's keeping these guys from doing it. So, frankly, whoever's decals you put on these pumps doesn't make any difference to me. We want them to sell ethanol. If this will help, great. If they want to use some other ones, that's terrific too. Make sure customers know what they're getting and know where they can get it, and I think that these people will continue to go there. If you've never seen a blender pump, I'm going to go over it very quickly. It was great that we had an actual standard blender pump out in the trade show. It'd be a better way to look at it there, but essentially this is no different than the blender pumps that were around 50 years ago and that are in use, where places where they have unleaded on one side and premium on the other, and they sold varying octane grades out of those hoses. Several years ago, some folks, and they'll debate whether it's northern Wisconsin or northern South Dakota, but they decided they were going to take their premium out and put E85 in and started blending that to make E10, E15, E20, E30. The market's changing there. In some markets in the United States, you can't buy straight gasoline anymore, so that may be E10 in one tank, E85 in another. There might be people that put E30 in one and E10 in the other. But either way, these things are these newer pumps that are being sold now, that most of the incentives are for, are pumps that are prepared to handle any blend of ethanol and gasoline that you can possibly sell, and going into the future, whatever chance there is. We know that marketers look at this, and in some cases, even whether they've been supporters or not, are saying, boy, if I can get a pump like this, a brand new pump that's upgraded, has all the latest bells and whistles, and I can pay less than I'd pay for a standard pump that doesn't do any of these things, why wouldn't I do it? we'd like to have them be a little more positive and want to sell our product more than that. But if that's the only reason they do it, at least the product will be out there. And they will find, like everybody finds when they start selling E10 in new markets, or like they found when they started selling E10, that it becomes a consumer fuel of choice. And we think that'll happen as we add more blends. As a petroleum marketer, the advantages of putting this kind of pump in are numerous. More, as I mentioned just now, you get more fueling options for people. Typically, you can use your existing tanks and pipes. There have been some discussion about that, but if you go to the Steel Tank Institute or Fiberglass Tank and Pipe Institute's pages, they list things that for the last 20 to 30 years where they've been compatible with blends of ethanol up to 100% ethanol. One thing that's very attractive is that, especially in the Midwest where ethanol is manufactured, that you can buy E85 directly from an ethanol plant. And there's typically some margin advantage there, that if you can go buy your E85 from the plant, buy your gas from your regular supplier, or for that matter, have your regular supplier handle both. But there's usually some margin advantage in being able to go directly to the supplier. I mentioned the flexibility so that any blends that come up in the future are there. The biggest one for most of the people that have used them over the last several years is that a standalone E85 pump cost the same as any other pump back when we started doing those things, and yet only a small percentage of the vehicles could use that and therefore would help pay for whatever somebody else didn't help you pay for. These pumps will sell any kind of product, and everybody, whether they're buying unleaded E10, E15, E85, or if you've got an extra product and you put premium on it, they all help pay for it. That's good economics. That helps sell the program. The turnover of the inventory is more similar to your other products. That was an issue with E85 where you'd buy it, it didn't sell very fast, and the market moved up and down pretty quickly, and you'd be in and out of the market with your E85 over time. In this case, because you're using it to make your other blends, it becomes more attractive to a marketer. And of course, they're ready for E15. Now, I think I've only got one more here, but before I go on, it's important to know that when we started talking about E15 as an industry, one of the reasons E15 was chosen is because the Underwriters Laboratories specification at the time said that a pump that was approved for ethanol was approved for up to 15% ethanol. Again, and I think the Iowa legislation addresses this. We don't want to make people think that the only way they can sell E15 is through a blender pump, because in many cases, your local fire marshal or the authorities having jurisdiction wherever you are can allow you to sell E15 through a standard pump. As oil companies try to meet the renewable fuel standard, and many of them have talked about maybe not selling straight unleaded because they don't want to have to buy RINs, we may have a situation like we had when unleaded and regular were in the market and regular was being phased out. And as soon as regular got phased out, we found a lot of spaces for E10. This may be a situation where as unleaded regular is phased out and they've got E10, they may have that tank and that pump available for E15. So don't assume that you have to get new equipment to do E15. Other blends, that might be the case, but and that also depends on different legislation or different regulations that you have. So these certainly, if you're buying a blender pump, those are certainly ready for E15 and any other blends that you might consider. The math of ethanol continues to be attractive. I know there's people, we're 24 days into the time where people said we'd never exist if it wasn't for VTEX, so we've made it that far. But as you can see, the economic advantages still exist. Just as an example, these are just national average prices. I think they were Chicago spot prices that I put into a chart put together with just a tax figure that's kind of a national average. But these aren't real costs. They're just sort of, they don't have freight, they don't have markup, they don't have anything. These are just spot costs. But as you can see, E85 is still pretty attractive in this particular situation. E10, E15, E30. So there are advantages. Hopefully, as we have this price advantage, we'll do a good job of selling the other advantages, making sure that people understand, it's an American renewable fuel. It's clean. It's clean octane. It's higher octane. It's all of the different things ethanol is. And while we have this price advantage, we need to make sure people know that they're buying a higher quality product at a good price. So with that, I will refer you Our website is ethanol.org. We're also, for petroleum marketers, if you send them to this byoethanol.com, that's geared towards petroleum marketers. Talks about things that they talk about, and we will, I think we're taking questions at the end of this, but thank you all for hanging around for this, and be happy to answer your questions when we're done with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Ron. And as Ron referenced, we are working very hard in Iowa to be the first state in the nation to have E15 available. And one of the things that's going to help get us there are retailers like W&H Co-op. We've got with us today Greg Emick. He's been the general manager with W&H Co-op since 2004. He has taken advantage of some of the state infrastructure programs that are out there to assist in putting these blender pumps in. And so they now have several locations that are offering E15 for the flex fuel vehicle customers. And he was recently recognized as the 2011 Ethanol Marketing Award winner and was presented that award by Secretary Northey. So, Greg, welcome.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I got to tell you, I'm not used to speaking in front of a lot of people. When Lucy first emailed me about doing this, she said, hold your presentation to 20 minutes. I didn't tell her that I don't talk 20 minutes in a week. But anyway, here goes. I'll do my best. W&H Cooperative Oil Company was formed in 1929. I thought I'd give you a little history about our co-op first before I got into the flex fuel part of it. The W and the H stand for Webster and Humboldt counties. The original headquarters was in Badger, Iowa, which is located about 6 miles north of Fort Dodge, but later moved the main office to Humboldt. We experienced gross sales last year of just over $41 million. As farm production in our area began to change in the 1980s, farmers began to navigate away from livestock and move heavily into the grain farming. This meant that in order for our co-op to survive, we were going to have to rely on something to help fill in the peaks and valleys between fall harvest and spring planting in order to maintain our refined fuel sales. The answer had to be urban retail fueling sites. Since then, we have added, we have 6 convenience stores and 5 unmanned card troll sites. W&H Co-op employs around 85 people. We have 2 tank wagon drivers, 4 propane drivers, 2 service people, 9 office personnel, 6 C-store managers, and approximately 62 part-time convenience store employees. And anybody that's in the C-store business says, you know that varies quite a bit on the part-time people. We have 3 larger Cenex Pride convenience stores and 3 smaller proprietary stores that we call Fastways. Our Fort Dodge Cenex Pride opened in the spring of 1995. The Humboldt Cenex Pride actually opened on September 12, 2001, the day after 9/11. And the Eagle Grove Cenex Pride opened in March of 2002. W&H Co-op was actually the very first retailer in Humboldt to offer E10. I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but do any of you remember with the first time that you offered E10 and your customers were used to getting the straight no lid, or at that time the premium they called ethyl? We had more plugged fuel filters than you can imagine. And one other thing to date myself, this is when the fuel tanks, you used to lower or trip the license plate and back to get to the fueling port. In 2004, when I became general manager of W&H Co-op, I had a couple of active farm customers that owned flex fuel vehicles and wondered if I had ever thought of adding E85. I didn't know a thing about E85, but I told him that I would look into it. I did a lot of digging to find out more about this flexible fuel. The more I learned, the more I became convinced that this is the edge that I wanted to set our co-op, excuse me, this is the edge that I wanted to set our co-op apart from other retailers in the area. Wanting to and legally being able to sell E85 was another thing. We had so many hurdles and so many obstacles to overcome. The average person would have said it isn't worth all the headaches, but I was determined to do this. We ended up offering E85 in the 3 amperide locations by 2005. A year ago last fall, we went to our board of directors and explained that our repair expenses on the older pumps were starting to add up. We knew that E15 could become the product of choice if government approved its use on 2001 newer vehicles. We knew there was grant money available from the Iowa Economic Development Department, later taken over by the Iowa Department of Agriculture, on flex fuel blending equipment. There again, I was trying to offer something totally different than my competition, knowing that we could offer 2 conventional grades of gasoline and 3 flex fuels at each station. We put a projected price together, applied for, and were approved for maximum grant money at all 3 Cenex Ampride sites. Our board of directors agreed to go ahead and commit to these projects. We finished up in August of 2011 with our last site. Our E15 sales were somewhat slow to increase, but the E30 sales jumped right away, and all flexible sales have been hanging in there every month. I feel with promotion, advertising, and public awareness about E15, it could become a larger percentage of sales at our retail facilities. I think our customers appreciate the fact that we are aggressively trying to promote flexible fuels because of their friendly environmental impact and competitive pricing. I do feel that one reason we have been successful with our flexible fuels is our employee training. I kind of made up my mind when we started this whole venture that if we were going to have flexible fuels in our stations, that our employees were going to be able to answer just about any customer question that could be fielded. I also train my employees to recognize flexible fuel vehicles and vehicles that can and are able to use E15. It will be interesting to see how our flexible fuel sales react to the loss of the federal tax credit. I don't know what's going to happen. I really believe in the flexible fuels market, though, and I want to see it continue to grow. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Are there questions from the audience? Anyone? Here we go.
Hi, John Norwood from West Des Moines. I've got a question. It's a cumulative question. I think it's for either of the speakers from the discussions today, and I would boil down. I have two thoughts in terms of uncertainties. One has to do with technology. Engines that are designed to optimize the performance of the fuels that you're talking about. We don't put gasoline into a diesel engine, and vice versa. We can put various blends of ethanol into a conventional gasoline engine, but we don't get optimal performance. So that's one thing I have swirling in the back of my mind. And related to that is pricing transparency. All of the fuels that we're talking about, whether it's diesel, conventional gas, E10, E85, they all have different energy densities, which means when we price them by the gallon, we're not really comparing an apple to an apple. And so I'm wondering, when we think about the consumer and we want to give them more choice, and we maybe want to give them 15 different blends of gasoline to choose from, how do they know from a pricing standpoint if gasoline is truly a commodity-based product? And I want to know, I'm thinking about gas mileage. How do I optimize my gas mileage? And how do I know which fuel I ought to be thinking about? Thank you.
All right.
Who wants to go first?
I'll give that a shot first. Hey, can you hear me all right with this, or do I need to turn something on?
Is it on?
I can scream. I can make a lot of noise if I need to. I guess the first question, vehicles are optimized right now to operate on the fuel that they have to test on in order to pass EPA's requirements. Right now we're going through a period, and a lot of people here are involved in things where they're taking comments regarding CAFE standards and Tier 3 standards, and without getting into an entirely separate subject matter, I think during that process there will probably be some changes made to the way we test vehicles to make sure that they are optimized. It makes no sense to me to continue to test vehicles on Indolene, which is a very consistent, basically premium gasoline that's used so that they can test the emissions because they're predictable, and to make engines run optimally on that when more than 95% of the fuel that consumers will buy is E10. So I think some of those things will be taken into account as EPA does their new regulations on that. That wasn't the case when they wrote the regulations. Then unleaded was the most common fuel, and it made sense to test on unleaded. As far as transparency in products, that's obviously why you do specifications for different products. E15 needs a specification that says what it is so that people know they're buying the same thing. E85 needs to be, their specification is going to be made broad right now. Unleaded gasoline specification actually includes E10. There isn't a different spec for that, and that's part of the reason that you see some of this variance that you see over the years when people have had different issues, maybe with the gasoline that they blend with it. As we've seen, as ethanol E10 went into some markets, they took bigger mileage hits than we thought they would because they were being made with a sub-octane, a very low grade of gasoline, which itself is going to contribute to mileage loss. One of the most consistent things in the entire fuel system is ethanol. The specification for ethanol is very, very tight. Ethanol, as far as mileage goes, if we decide that we're going to, if the fuel marketplace decides that the most important thing, the only important thing, the thing they want to focus on is mileage, then what I would expect is that retailers will market fuel by its mileage. We can't just assume that everybody who buys a particular fuel buys it because it gets them the most mileage. If we did that, then everybody would probably have diesel cars or some other kind of thing. On an energy equivalent basis, you've also got the fact that if you change the engine to do different things, you can get better mileage with ethanol blends than you can, that you can get better mileage out of ethanol blends than you would if you didn't, for example, if you didn't turbocharge them, if you didn't do some of the other things that were out there. But we got to keep in mind as people who market a product too, that there are other advantages to this fuel. If you get great mileage but you pollute a lot, there aren't going to be a lot of people who are going to like that. And if you get great mileage but it's absolutely made somewhere where you don't want to send any money, there are people who won't want to buy that. And so we need to make sure that we're promoting all of the different benefits to our fuel. And I don't think anybody is, we all know what the difference is in BTU content. The difference in E10 is about 2.5% to 3%. The difference, if unleaded isn't out there, though, we're talking about the difference between 10 and 15. People will do their calculations. Different vehicles react differently, and I think people will buy what they want to buy. I think what we need to do is make sure that if a sign says E10 on it, that it's what E10 is supposed to be and that it meets the specification. And the same with 15 and 30 and 85 and whatever else it is. And that's the way the products will get sold. And people will buy them for whatever reason they buy them. The same way people buy premium now, and some buy diesel, and some have hybrids, and some have other things. But I think our job is to make sure we're making a consistent, high-quality product and make sure that people know where it is and how much is in there, and for whatever reason they choose to buy it, make sure that it's available in as many places as we can make it available.
At the risk of getting stoned, I got a quick question here for you. Warren Pitcher from West Des Moines, Iowa, lived there 30 years. Had an independent convenience store on the north side of Des Moines, 83 to 92. Currently an investor in Lincoln Way Energy in Nevada because that's where I graduated high school. My question can actually go to either one of these two gentlemen, but one quick comment. I've been here all day, and Lucy, the quality of the speakers and the topics has just been excellent. I wouldn't have left this. I wanted to hear everybody. So you two happened to pull the last session of the day, but trust me, I had some friends that were not unhappy with the conference. They just had to leave. But anyway, Ron mentioned early on that there were some folks that no matter what you told them about ethanol, they had their minds made up. Don't confuse them with facts. They had their minds made up. I'd like to know maybe the 2 or 3 top alibis, reasons, misinformation that you hear on why they won't even try it. And thank you for your time.
You go first from what you hear, if you've got it. Try first.
Well, I think probably the number one thing we hear is their mechanics are telling them that ethanol is no good for the engines. And that's probably, from what I hear, any engine that's torn down is a lot cleaner after burning ethanol than straight no-lead gas. That's probably the number one reason we hear people don't want to try flexible fuels. I think some people are just, people are such creatures of habit. They're so used to using straight no-lead or E10. They go to the pump and this is the hose I've grabbed for 15 years. This is the hose I'm going to continue to use. But I think through education and, we even take the time once in a while on Friday afternoon to go out and help at each of our stations. We'll go out and try and educate people a little bit. They'll pull up and we'll pump their gas for them for an hour or two and just talk to people and just inform them. Did you realize you could use E15 in this car or pickup? Well, no, I didn't know that. Won't hurt a thing. You shouldn't notice any difference in mileage. A lot of people that have, the flexible fuel vehicles are afraid to try E85 because they've heard horror stories on the mileage. Well, then don't try E85. Take the jump, take the leap, try E30. You're not going to notice, very little mileage difference in E30, but you can, a lot of times save 15 to 20 cents a gallon by trying that. And I think it's just consumer education and getting people to understand that the flex fuel vehicles and ethanol-based vehicles are not going to hurt their car. That's the biggest thing I've found.
When we did, I mentioned that we did a very small study. There was people stood at a station for a day, and of a sample, a really small sample size, I think it's 30, 35 people. It went about 2/3 that were using E10 and 1/3 that weren't. And of the third that weren't, 2 or 3 of those actually were and didn't know it. But they said they don't ever use ethanol. They never use it. They just use this stuff right here. So like you said, they pick up that hose they've always picked up. But of the ones that said that they didn't want to use it, the top answer was mileage. They said they got worse mileage. The next 3 were all versions of the same thing. My mechanic said I shouldn't. I don't know if I can, or I don't know if I should, or it's not my car, and my dad said or my mom said that I only should put straight unleaded in it. So I think, but again, those same people that were unsure, 2/3 of them were sure that they weren't going to use it. And ironically, one of the people who won't use ethanol and won't use it because his mechanic said he wouldn't and would never switch was one of the people that was buying E10. So, how long do you dwell on that when you say, okay, if 80% of if 2/3 of the people at this station on this day, and actually more like 70% of them were buying E10, and 80% of the 2/3 said they'd buy E15, let's go after those guys first, make sure they know it's available. And I think one of the things that cures people from some of those worries is just over time knowing that they used the stuff and didn't have any problems. There's always fear of the unknown, and E15 is going to be a little bit unknown, but even the people who know don't really know. So.